Mr. Wilson, I really don't understand why power is such a big deal in China, and I think it's because I don't know the difference between reigning and ruling. Can you explain?
Sure, that's an excellent question. Of course, power, in a way, we could say is important around the world. Governments are everywhere, and all governments have a bit of power attached to them. So it's perhaps not so surprising that power is important. But what is different about power? What makes it different between Asian cultures, in particular China, and, say, the West, like the United States, is this concept of reigning and ruling. Now, in the West, we easily understand the idea of ruling. We're going to elect this year, and every 4 years, someone who is going to make decisions. So the president's going to decide who he will name to the Supreme Court. He has to get the approval of the Senate, but he chooses. The Senate doesn't get to choose. And the same for cabinet office. The president said can veto a bill. We say no to a bill, and he can trump an action taken by the Senate and the House. It can be overridden, but again, he gets the initial decision. So the decisions are very important. Now the Chinese are a little concerned about that because power for the Chinese is meant to be a way of stopping luan, or chaos. And that chaos is a primal fear, an utterly basic fear. Because it is so important, you have to have massive power to replace it. So the Chinese, in particular in Asia, have a desire for a very strong central government, one that looks so overwhelmingly powerful that it could crush any opposition. That's one of the reasons why the Chinese military is always so large. It's not particularly effective for fighting overseas, but it's terrific at maintaining order domestically. Now, if you're going to say power is that important, then you can't have the emperor making a mistake. Because if he makes a mistake, that says, oops, our central power is not in proper shape. And that's very important. So you don't want to have the emperor making decisions. It's as if someone were very wealthy and he wasn't concerned at all about paying his bills. He'd say, well, I have someone that I hire to take care of that. And he doesn't particularly care about cleaning the house. He's hired someone to take care of that. That's the attitude behind reigning. The emperor is so powerful that he doesn't have to make any decisions. He has other people for that. Now, he may secretly, quietly tell them what to say, but the appearance is always going to be that he's reigning and not ruling. Seems strange, but it is evident in the clips. I don't know.
Yes, sir. Now, in those clips, what are some key examples of reigning and ruling that you could point out to us?
Excellent. Well, one of the ones that I think is outstanding, there's several, but in the China in Revolution video that's on YouTube,
yes,
there's a particular mass meeting. 1 million students and citizens are in the streets at the start of the Cultural Revolution. And Mao Zedong is right there. But he doesn't make a speech. He has his underling, a man named Lin Biao, who's the second in command. He makes the speech. Can you imagine calling for a presidential address in this country? You're going to have President Obama speak, and while he stands there, he brings in Joe Biden to talk in his place. Unbelievable. But you see, the idea is, if Mao were to make a speech and you make a mistake, oh, well, that's bad for the central power, which has to be perfect and perfectly strong. That's the difference between reigning and ruling. Is there a justification for it? Well, the Chinese think there is, because they are so concerned about deterring crime, so concerned about deterring disorder, that they're going to have central power be absolutely critical.
Do you feel that the difference between reigning and ruling is bad?
Listen, with regard, I've said this before, I'm not trying to convert anyone to Confucianism.
Yeah.
But what I would like people to do in looking at a non-Western situation is say, what are the advantages of the school of thought? What are the disadvantages of the school of thought? It might even lead them to think about their own thinking. What in our cultural tradition is helpful? What is harmful? I think a belief in individual human rights is vital for us, but it does have a disadvantage because it can lead to politics that is contentious, it can lead to people calling people names, And the Chinese would be very uncomfortable with that. The Chinese, on the other hand, avoid the problem of people ever calling national leaders names. On the other hand, they're kind of stuck if they get a bad leader. They're very reluctant to criticize him. And that means he could stay in power for years and years, making mistake after mistake, but nobody will call it to his attention. I think other examples are possible. Think of this. In the period after Mao died, 2 or 3 years went by with a caretaker, and then Deng Xiaoping came along.
Right.
Deng Xiaoping was always called the paramount leader, and everybody looked to him. But you realize he was only a vice premier? He never got a higher office than that, and he did that in order to appear to be unimportant, even though he was critically important. That meant he could fire people if they screwed up without affecting his own power position.
Thank you, Professor Wilson.
Thank you very much. Those are good questions.
Yes.